In this second video, I want to talk about the tone of the article, how US gun culture stacks up with the rest of the world, as well as the rhetorical techniques that the writer uses. So, to begin with, tone refers to the author's attitudes towards his, her, their subject matter. And we can get a sense of the tone by thinking about it in terms of, is it negative attitude? Is it a positive attitude? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Is it a neutral attitude? Few things that we look at to consider tone. So we're going to look at the word choice that the writers use, and we're also going to look at the details that are included. For instance, if authors use overwhelmingly negative details to talk about a subject, it means that they probably have a negative attitude towards that subject matter. So, looking at just the first paragraph of the article, we're going to again highlight words like ubiquitous, which means far reaching, unscathed. Scathed means harmed, so unscathed means unable to remain unharmed. We can look at words like gun, we can look at words like threaten, we can look at words like outlier, and we see a pattern of negativity. These words have slightly negative connotations associated with them. Also, after you've read the whole article, you'll notice that the authors only use negative details. There are no details that suggest any positive outcomes or any benefits of gun ownership whatsoever. This also suggests that our authors have a negative attitude or that the tone is a negative tone towards the topic of gun culture. Next, I want to turn to talking about rhetorical techniques. As a reminder, rhetorical techniques refer to the choices or the techniques that a writer or a speaker uses in order to communicate their point. In this case, the three most common rhetorical categories that uh, we study are considered are called ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, ethos refers to using somebody else's credibility in order to build your case. I would see ethos in this text if there were a lot of quotes from famous people, for example, politicians, world leaders, or perhaps doctors, psychologists. We don't see a lot of that, and so we know that the piece does not really rely on ethos to make its point. Instead, the piece uses a lot of logos. Logos refers to using facts or statistics, data, in order to make your point or to convince your audience. In this case, if we scroll through and take a look at some of the infographics that are included, we see that the author is using both text as well as imagery in order to use logos or in order to invoke logos to make their point. So the infographic that we're looking at now compares US gun ownership. 100 for every 100 people in the United States, there are 120.5 guns. We can compare that to elsewhere in the world by playing with the drop down menu. The closest to the United States is the Falkland Islands. For every 100 people, there are 62.1 guns. So, this is an example of using factual information in order to support the argument or to communicate the message that the writers are trying to put forward. Another example of logos we'll see here. About 44% of US adults live in a household with a gun, and about one third own one personally. That is another example of factual information or logos that is being used to convince the audience or to put forward a message. The last kind of rhetorical technique, or the category of rhetorical technique, we call pathos. Pathos refers to an emotional appeal. We see pathos in the tone or in the word choice, which we talked about earlier. Having an overly negative tone or an overly positive tone are examples of trying to use emotional appeal in order to bring your audience over to your side. So, as you move on this week and read the other articles that are posted to Blackboard, I want you to think about what the rhetorical situation is, including what is the tone and how is the writer using ethos, pathos, or logos in order to make their point.